Today I'm going to be beating Pokemon Crystal with only the Venomoth line. And I think this does deserve some explanation because I have mentioned in a few live streams and videos that I'm not really liking evolution during these videos. So this is the last one that I took footage of before I really started thinking about changing my approach. And starting with my first Pokemon Crystal video in January, I am not going to be evolving during playthroughs anymore. Of course, this does have an implication for all of the results that I've collected to date, but I think I can address that later on in the video when we finally have some results for this cute little poisonous furball. Now, something I find really interesting about this evolutionary line is how its stats flip when it evolves. So Venonat has more physical attack and less special attack, but then when it evolves into Venomoth, it gets more special attack and less physical attack. So if you're a new player and you're noticing that Venonat does a lot more damage with a move like Swift, but less with a move like Confusion, then when it evolves, it's really gonna confuse you. Through level up, it has all the moves that we would expect this thing to have. It starts with Tackle, Disable, and Foresight, which is not going to be useful at all. And then later on, it gets access to Confusion, Leech Life, Psybeam, Sleep Powder, and Psychic. Through TMs and HMs, it doesn't get access to very much. Giga Drain, Solar Beam, Return, Psychic, which it already learns through level up, Sludge Bomb, Swift, and Rest. Just because of how limited this move pool is, I think its final moveset is going to be fairly intuitive to come up with. It'll probably be something like Sleep Powder, Psychic, Return, and maybe Sludge Bomb. I could see Rest taking one of those moves places, like Sludge Bomb, because Sludge Bomb is a physical move in Generation 2, and Poison is not particularly useful offensively. Anyways, we'll have to wait till we get there to find out. So let's jump into this playthrough and see how things started. First of all, I fight the rival, and in this case I gave him Cyndaquil because I think that's going to be the hardest for Venonat to go up with. I got lucky at the beginning of this fight, getting a critical hit. After that, Venonat isn't doing very much damage. Oh, sweet, another critical hit, so that's perfect. And a third one? Are you kidding me? This fight was very lucky. Well, I'll take it for now. With that battle out of the way and the rival named, let's talk about Venonat's growth rate. It has a medium fast growth rate, which is the second slowest growth rate for the early game, so I'm going to fight all of the trainers prior to Violet City. This leads me to Bugcatcher Wade, who is the last one of all of them, and I didn't heal going into this fight, so I only have 8 PP left on Tackle. If you didn't know, this really basic normal type move does not have perfect accuracy, despite having only 35 base power, so I really need to not miss here because I am not one-shotting any of these bugs. I knock out the first 3 without missing, so that's perfect. Okay, please just hit the next 2. My second last tackle hits, and then my last one does as well. Okay, so perfect. Now all I have to do is run into a Bellsprout and catch it. I do encounter one, and I throw a lot of Pokeballs at it, but unfortunately I'm not able to snag it just yet, so I'll have to catch one after Violet City. That's totally fine. Next is Sprout Tower, and in here I'm going to fight all of the trainers again. After all, Falkner's Gym is first, and all of the flying types in there pose a threat against Venonat. When I started doing Generation 2 challenges on the channel, I started with Pokemon like Butterfree, Ariados, Ladian, and yeah, all of those Pokemon are not very good against Falkner, and I expect the same to be true of Venonat. Okay, so let's go up against the Sage at the top of the tower. I should be fine here. I have enough Tackle PP left over. He leads with a Bellsprout. This one's fairly high leveled for this area. It's level 7. That means Tackle is going to knock it out over 4 turns. It goes down. Venonat levels up to level 11. He sends in his second Bellsprout next. And this one is going to take another 4 hits, giving it the chance to whittle me down to just above half health. Okay, Hoothoot's next. It comes out, uses Foresight, which is basically useless here. I was going to try to go for Supersonic to confuse it. I miss once, but my second one lands. Hoothoot still moves, hits Tackle, and takes me down to 13 hit points. Okay, this isn't feeling good. It hits again, taking Venonat down to 8 hit points, and then down to 3 hit points. I take it down to red, and please, Supersonic, just make this thing miss once. But it doesn't, and so that's my first reset. There is an obvious solution here. If against the Hoothoot I just consistently use Tackle, I am going to win. Well, unless Tackle misses. It does actually, it misses but only once, and that is good enough for me to win. I use the conveniently placed escape rope to leave, and then I head to Falkner's Gym. Now the first trainer in here is Birdkeeper Abe, and he has a single Spearow, which is level 9. So the highest level of any Pokemon yet in the game. It actually is equivalent to Falkner's Ace, and it does know Peck, so I need to be careful. I'm going to save first. And Venonat, unfortunately, is not very fast, so the Spearow moves first, hits Peck, doing a third, and my tackle does half with a critical hit. Okay, that's good, I guess. The Spearow goes for Peck again, taking me down to orange health. I strike back with Tackle, and it takes the Spearow to red. But because it's moving first, it knocks Venonat out. Okay, so 2 resets early on. That is not very encouraging. I try Birdkeeper Abe again, and I was like, well, I can use Supersonic to mess the Spearow up, but yeah, this fight goes a lot worse. I miss twice, and then it just polishes Venonat off, because Supersonic is, if you didn't know, one of the worst moves in the game. That's largely because its accuracy is 55%. Anyways, there might be another way to win here, so let's try again. Since Spearow is outspeeding, if I go for Disable, then it'll use Peck first, and I will disable Peck, meaning it can no longer deal super effective damage to Venonat. This is also good because this Spearow is a high enough level that it also knows Growl, meaning it's not even going to get Struggle if I disable its Peck. So as a result, it just spams Growl, and Venonat is able to take it out. So that's perfect. Before Birdkeeper Rod, I spend a moment healing Venonat, and I just want to say it is so weird that Venonat has the Weedle sprite in your party. Someone mentioned this earlier with Azumarill because it has the Jigglypuff sprite. If only they had made like a generic bug sprite that is not a Weedle. Now Birdkeeper Rod is a lot easier because he only has 2 level 7 Pidgeys and they both just know Tackle, so Venonat takes an easy win here. But how will Falkner be? Well, let's see. He leads with Pidgey, and if this was Gen 1, I'm sure it would find a way to prioritize Mudslap against me with good AI, but in Generation 2, the opponents can actually see the damage ranges that they're about to get with whatever move they choose, so it knows that Tackle is going to be doing more damage, and as a result, it is only going to spam this move. By the way, going into this fight, I was really not confident. I was like, there is no way that Venonat beats Falkner at level 12, but I finished the first Pidgey off so easily, like, I took 6 hit points of damage. Next is the Pidgeotto though, and it does have Gust, which is going to be super effective, and it has the same type attack bonus. Venonat moves first. Okay, so I guess I'm outspeeding the Pidgeotto, but not the Spearow when I was level 11. Alright, makes sense. I did about a 5th. Pidgeotto strikes back with Gust, and that takes Venonat down to just above half health. However, there is play here because now I can just use Disable, and that stops Pidgeotto from using Gust. And because I move first, this disables Gust after Pidgeotto selected it, so it actually doesn't get to move this turn. I use Tackle, taking the Pidgeotto down to just above half health. It strikes back with its own Tackle, taking me under half, but a berry recovers this damage, and as a result, I am going to outlast the bird. Making things even better for Venonat is the fact that Pidgeotto misses a Tackle. I miss one too, so I guess it's even, and then I finish off Falkner's Ace. Okay, so Falkner was a lot easier than I expected. I did anticipate at least 1 reset there and probably some extra leveling. Anyways, it's nice to not have to do that. His badge gives me a 12.5% boost to my attack stat, which is going to be really nice because I'm mostly using physical moves right now. After that, I head to the Pokemon Center. In here, I just want to mention something that I do with my rooting to save a tiny bit of time. I heal, and then I talk to Professor Elm's aide, who is right beside Nurse Joy, so this is really efficient. And after he gives me the egg, I just head to the PC immediately and deposit it. This is so that later on, I do not have to go back to the PC and withdraw an HM Mule when I catch it, and also so the egg doesn't hatch during my playthroughs, because, yeah, that just wastes time. Following the Poke Center, I head to the Pokemart, and here you can normally pick up some escape ropes, which will help later in the playthrough, but today I'm going to buy Pokeballs because I failed to catch a Bellsprout earlier on. South of here, I pick up the Paralyzed Cure Berry. It's very useful for Lance. And then I finally catch myself a Bellsprout. I nickname it after a viewer who was watching me play this playthrough on Twitch. So yeah, follow me on Twitch if you want to see some live content. By the way, people have asked me, why do you sometimes stream on Twitch and why do you sometimes stream on YouTube? So I should explain that. Whenever I'm streaming on YouTube, I am trying to make it more of a polished presentation of a run. So for instance, I'll write notes for myself. I'll go through sort of a planned ordering of a script at the beginning to make sure that I talk about everything I have to talk about with the Pokemon. Usually I'm also doing a replay of a Pokemon that I've already made a video on, so I want to get as good results as possible. So I will have run damage ranges and rooted the Pokemon, that sort of thing. But on Twitch when I stream, it is much more raw. Sometimes I'm just like sitting and coding and like talking about Pokemon. Other times I'll be doing a playthrough for the first time and it'll feel very sloppy. Or I could be like testing an overlay just to see if it works, something like that. So I'm going to have more casual streams on Twitch and more polished streams on YouTube. However, in 2023, I am going to play around with the idea of streaming my first attempts of the playthrough on YouTube and then unlisting the VOD immediately after the stream. Then when the official video comes out, I'll also post in the description the unlisted VOD, and you can go and check out the stream if you want to get like a more in-depth sense of how the playthrough went. And also if you want to see exactly how I did everything. I know a lot of you are probably interested in doing similar playthroughs yourself for fun or to make videos, and you're probably wondering all the small minutia that I do, like when do I pick up this item and how do I route this area. So watching a stream can be really helpful to grab all of those juicy details. In Union Cave, I make sure I go down to the bottom floor and grab Swift. After all, this is a good replacement for Foresight, and it gives Venonat a move that is almost twice as good as Tackle. And that's really good because Bugsy's coming up next, and I don't really have a great solution for him. I defeat the Rockets in Slowpoke well, and this gives Venonat enough experience to level up to level 17 where it learns Confusion. Okay, now let's take on Bugsy. He leads with Metapod. Here it makes sense to go for Confusion, but it's only doing about a third, so it takes 3 turns to knock it out. At least the Kakuna is part poison type, so it's going to be easier to knock out. I'll just note here on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice that Kakuna and Scyther do not have species names. That is a glitch that I was not aware of when I did this playthrough, so we will not be patching it in post. That would take way too long and really not be worth it. Just know that for all future videos, this issue has now been resolved. I just didn't change the name of a property in my code, so sloppy little mistake from me, I'm very sorry. Scyther's next, and it's of course going to go for Fury Cutter, and I figured here that my play around this powerful move would be to use Disable. But here's the thing. Disable has 55 accuracy as well. Yes, it has the same accuracy as Supersonic. I don't know why, because Disable is not particularly good. As a result, it doesn't work and Scyther knocks Venonat out. Now this is essentially my New Year's Eve special, so I'm going to take a little bit of extra time to explain things that normally I don't in my videos. Here you'll notice when my Venonat faints, I accidentally press A one too many times and I go into the Pokemon selection where I'm about to choose my next Pokemon to send out, and then I reset. This is kind of sloppy, and you'll probably notice in some of my videos that it looks like my Pokemon faints and then I kind of sit on that screen for a little bit of time. I'm sure some of you are thinking at that moment, like, why don't you just reset quicker? You're going to save time. Well, the truth of the matter is that I'm always trying to get footage that is going to be able to be edited very easily. And in this case, it makes sense to let the Pokemon faint and then watch the cursor blink like once or twice after the Pokemon has fainted so that we have a good spot to cross dissolve. However, in this case, I pressed A too fast, so I gave Sean a bad edit. And in this case, I'm just going to talk over it so that we can watch the full reset sequence, and then the footage will look smooth anyways. So if you notice a quirk in my play and you're not quite sure why I'm doing it, maybe consider asking the question, would doing things this way provide an advantage when I'm producing the video? I thought about this a lot earlier on the channel because I was like, maybe this would make it unfair for some Pokemon, but I really don't think this is the case because I do treat all of my playthroughs this way. I start resetting a lot faster if I have, say, lost to the gym leader like 15 times. Then I will reset as fast as possible because usually we're just going to quickly cut between a bunch of fights and I don't need to show the whole fainting animation anyways. In the next fight, I make it back to the Scyther, and I was really hoping here that I could use Supersonic in combination with Disable, and I actually get it, which is perfect. But there's a problem, because Scyther starts using Quick Attack then, and yeah, it still just knocks Venonat out. Okay, so instead of trying this again, let's level up more. I can fight Bugcatcher Benny in here to gain a lot of experience. He has a Weedle, a Kakuna, and a Beedrill, and it's a fully evolved Pokemon, so it actually provides a lot of experience. After that, I fight the trainer with the Paris. I really don't like to fight him because he often paralyzes your Pokemon. It actually does happen today. After that, I backtrack and I fight Hiker Anthony, and that brings Venonat very close to level 19, so now I'm going to level up on Bugsy's first 2 Pokemon. And here I'll explain something else, which is, why don't you just black out after the gym battles and keep all of the experience? Well, this one is part style and part an actual answer. First of all, I'll explain the style. Yeah, I'm just really used to resetting after I've saved in front of a gym leader, so it's kind of habit now. And the actual reason is that if I black out, I have to let all my HM mules faint, and that's kind of against the rules. Like, I don't really like to use them in battle in any circumstances. The only time I give myself the exception is if I have to black out after saving during the Elite Four. But letting all my mules faint takes a lot of extra time, and that will accumulate into both the real time and game time, so in some ways resetting is faster. I could of course just deposit the rest of my team before each major battle like this, but that also takes a lot of time. And then do I just make that a rule for myself, like every Pokemon, even if they are going to easily beat the gym leader and not have to reset, do they have to deposit the Pokemon and then withdraw them to be fair? So overall, I think the thing that is fairest is just saving in front of every gym leader, and when you lose, you just reset. And unfortunately, once again, in this next fight against Bugsy, I have to reset. So let's go and do some more training. I'm going to train up to level 20 because this is over a damage rounding threshold. So let's finally go and beat Bugsy. You'll notice here that I'm trying to use Supersonic and Disable in combination with each other, but like these moves are just so bad. So eventually I'm just like, no, I'm going to attack with Confusion and we'll just see if we can get it done. Apparently at this level, after stopping Fury Cutter at least once, I am able to knock out his Scyther and finally take the victory. Now for a bug type, this should be an awesome badge to have because it gives a boost to all bug type moves. 12.5% boost. But in this case, the only bug type move that the Venonat line gets access to is Leech Life. And this is not a Generation 7 Leech Life, so yeah, it's base 20 power. Next, I have to face the rival just outside of Azalea Town, and yeah, despite him having a Quilava that knows Ember, this fight is not difficult because Venonat's Confusion is quite powerful. It's super effective against both the Ghastly and the Zubat, so I take an easy victory and move into the forest. Normally in here I get access to Headbutt, but not today. The Venonat line cannot learn it. I proceed through on the next route just before Goldenrod. I continue fighting some trainers so that I'm leveling up. After all, I anticipate that Whitney is going to be quite hard with a bug type. And let's be real, the clock is approaching 30 minutes right now, and Venonat has not even got its 3rd badge. For a Johto playthrough, this is quite slow. And that's another reason I really want to use first stage Pokemon without evolutions. We just need to populate the bottom portion of the tier list because there are a lot of Pokemon close to the top. So we need to get like a truly awful time. I'm thinking a Pokemon like Coughing might do just that, so I guess in January we're going to have to see. Just before Whitney, I fight an optional trainer in her gym so that Venonat levels up to level 25 over a damage rounding threshold, and I teach it Leech Life in the place of Supersonic. Good riddance for this move. I am keeping Disable just in case it helps against Rollout. Now let's see how my bug does against the Cowmaster. She leads with Clefairy, and if you can't one-shot this thing, it can be annoying because it has Metronome. I go for Swift, it does half. It uses Metronome, getting Future Sight. Okay, so that is going to do damage to me later on. Miltank's next. It goes for Rollout first turn, which does like, oh gosh, that's a lot for a first turn Rollout. I get hit by Future Sight, and then I try to use Disable to stop it from using the Rock-type move, but it fails, and as a result, the Miltank takes Venonat out. I tried the fight again because Miltank is outspeeding Venonat, so I'm like, haha, it's going to go for Rollout, do very little damage, and then I can just use Disable, but this time it uses Stomp, and then I disable Stomp, so that's not what I wanted. It goes for Rollout the next turn, and yeah, this is another loss. So there are still a lot of trainers in the surrounding area that I can fight. I can face one more trainer inside of Whitney's gym, and then I can head north to face these 2 lovebirds. After that, I head into the national park, and there are a lot of trainers here, so I fight all of them, and that brings Venonat up to level 26. So I'm going to have to do some grinding in the wild here. I finish off all the remaining trainers south of Goldenrod City, train in the wild, and level up to level 28. And this level does have a big advantage, which isn't just the damage rounding. It is the fact that I have Stun Spore, which is going to be a more reliable way to mess the Miltank up than Disable. After all, this move has 75% accuracy, which is like plus 20% accuracy. perfect. I paralyze Miltank. This also cuts its speed, but still it doesn't stop Rollout from knocking Venonat out. I try it again, and this time I get so close. I take the Miltank down to red health, and then it finishes me off. I was like, that was so close, let's try again. And this time it uses Attract on me, so you might be wondering, like, why not just use a female Pokemon, because then the Miltank can't do this to you. But that's a bad idea, because in Generation 2, all female Pokemon have low attack DVs. And that's bad for two reasons in this game. Well, number one, your attack DV is low, so I would be doing less damage and have a lower attack stat. But number two, I can then not have a base 70 power hidden power. So yeah, and that's because hidden power's type and power are based on your DVs. So if you have low DVs, you will have a lower power hidden power. And if you have high DVs, you will have a higher power hidden power. I really dislike talking about base power and effective power when I'm talking about hidden power, because all of my sentences are like power, 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 power. Anyways, Venonat is not very powerful because I am going to have to level up more, and I just resigned myself to the fact that I am going to need level 31, because at that level, Venonat will evolve into Venomoth. Now, I said when this happened I would have to explain Venomoth's type for this video, and Venomoth's type in this video is Bug Poison. I know, right? I figured that every year I should probably make a new Venomoth video and explain the meme to everyone who is new to the channel, because there's always someone in the comments that's just like, hey, I don't really get it, I'm new around here, why do you always say Venomoth is such an absurd type? So I should explain it. When I first started making these videos, I had no idea how to play these games. Like, I was terrible. My type chart knowledge was all over the place, and usually against Koga in yellow version, I would use terrible moves against the Venomoth, because most of the time I thought that it was a flying type. Like, genuinely at the start of this channel, I thought that this thing was a psychic flying type. And then over time I realized that it was not in fact that type, but even then I still used awful moves against it for way too long. So at some point, I just decided to be like, yeah, you know what? Every time I see this thing, I'm just going to say the most absurd things about it, because clearly I can't get this right, even if I try. So yeah, that's where the meme came from. And now Venomoth is quite obviously the Steel type. But will it be enough to resist Whitney's rollout? Well, let's find out. Now, because I've evolved to Venomoth, Confusion is now the best move to use. After all, I have much higher special attack than I have regular attack, and that is even without a boost to my special attack with a badge. I knocked the Clefairy out in 2 hits, and unfortunately on the Miltank, I miss a paralysis. I get it on the second turn, and then I use Confusion, and it looks like it's dealing a third, so this is going to be enough. Venomoth finishes her off, and with that I've earned my 3rd badge. This one gives a 12.5% boost to my speed stat, as well as a 12.5% boost to all normal type moves. So you can see this accounted for in the top left, because now Swift's power has been updated to 68. This is actually 67.5, but having the 0.5 looks so bad on the overlay, and I just refuse to do that. It's terrible. Someone was like, you should show the exact numbers. No, I will not do it. It looks so bad. I would have to put 0.0 after all of the other powers to make it look even half decent. However, the game does round down in a lot of places, and I realize that I am rounding up on my overlay, so at some point in the new year I am going to be making this change so that all of my effective powers round down instead of rounding up. Just before Ecruteak City, I want to draw your attention to a hidden item. There is an ether over here by the sign, and then in Ecruteak City, there is a hidden hyper potion up here by this little pond. After that, I go head to head with the Kimono Girls, finishing all of them up. They give a lot of experience. It's really nice. After that, I start my journey towards the Lake of Rage, where I'm going to obtain hidden power. Today for Venomoth, it is going to be an ice type move, and with it, I am ready to head back to Burn Tower and face the rival. Confusion one-shots the Haunter, next he sends in Quilava. Now here, Swift has the highest effective power. I wasn't really sure if it would do more damage than Confusion, but in the end I go for it, and it's a 2-hit anyways, so that's pretty good. Next is Magnemite. I take it out with 1 Confusion followed by a Hidden Power, and after that, there's only the Zubat, and Hidden Power easily polishes it off. So now, it's time to take on Morty. Because they weren't kind to this guy and they didn't give him Misdreavus, Confusion is going to be super effective against all of his ghost poison types. I go for it, and it one-shots the Ghastly. That's perfect, I'm not going to get cursed. Next is Haunter. Venomoth outspeeds because, yeah, Venomoth got a big boost to its speed stat when it evolved. I one-shot it with Confusion as well, and that leads to his ace, Gengar. In this case, I have the Mint Berry, so I'm not even concerned here when I don't one-shot. It also misses Hypnosis, and then I take it out. So all that's left is another Haunter, and this one goes down in a single hit too. And with that, I have given Venomoth enough experience to level up to 36 where it learns Psybeam, so that's excellent. And I've also earned myself the Fog Badge. Now, Bug Poison is a great typing for the mid-game in Johto because Chuck is coming up next, and I have a double resistance against his fighting type moves. However, first, before I get to him, I have to head by the lighthouse, and in here I'm going to battle Birdkeeper Dennis. I should probably explain who he is. Well, in the early days of my channel, like when I had like 200 subscribers, Dennis used to comment just Scott on every single one of my videos, and I thought he was just trying to be mean because he didn't like my videos or something like that. Turns out he likes my videos and he's still watching them today, so if you see Dennis commenting Scott in the comments, reply back with Dennis. With that out of the way, I make my way to the island and fight the mandatory trainers in the gym. By the way, they're all very easy for Venomoth. After all, Psybeam is super effective. So now, let's take on Chuck. He leads with Primeape. I go for Psybeam, and it takes it out in a single hit. Okay, that's perfect. Time to move on to his ace, Poliwrath. I go for Psybeam on it as well. It does more than half. Poliwrath goes for Surf, which I guess makes the most sense. It doesn't do very much to me, and I finish it on the next turn. Okay, so that was an easy gym, just as I expected. With this badge comes the ability to fly, so I head back to New Barktown. By the way, this is really easy because you can just spam A through the fly dialogue and it will take you here immediately. I want to fly here just so that I can pick up the item the Pink Bow, which boosts the power of normal type moves. After that, I head to Violet City where I pick up a rare candy, and then I surf south of Goldenrod City to pick up the Nugget and the rare candy. So now it's time to buckle in because the Rocket plotline is starting. I went up against the Gyarados without healing, which was a tiny bit scary when Dragon Rage does so much to me, but luckily on the next turn it just goes for Bite and then I knock it out. With that, I initiate the Rocket plotline, and this is going to take a while. Now, I will mention here one TM that you might think is going to be exceptional for Venomoth, which is Sludge Bomb. Of course, in modern Pokemon games, this move deals special damage, but in Generation 2, all Poison-type moves are physical, so it's going to utilize Venomoth's lower attack stat. Also, the Poison typing is not particularly good offensively until the Fairy type is introduced, so of all the major opponents in the game, it's really only going to be doing super effective damage against Will's Executor and like Erica's team and Blue's Executor, but that's basically it. The fact that so many grass types are paired with the poison type really hurts this type's offensive potential because after all, poison does resist poison. In this generation, you get access to the TM after you defeat all the rockets here, but today I'm actually not going to pick it up because I just think Venomoth is going to be better using psychic moves. After all, as I regularly say on this channel, it's basically a psychic type. With the bad guys defeated and the fact that I'm in Mahogany Town, let's take on Price next. He leads with Seal. I go for Psybeam, it does more than half. I get hit by an Icy Wind, lowering my speed, and then I knock the Seal out on the next turn. Dugong's next. Unfortunately, Psybeam isn't doing more than half to it, but it does confuse and prevent one turn. So that's perfect. I use it again, taking the Dugong to red health, and then it just knocks itself out. Alright, so that's sort of the perfect scenario. Next is Piloswine. Now, I just want to direct your eyes over to the right side of the screen so you can see its moveset. Its moveset is awful. Icy Wind, Fury Attack, Mist, and Blizzard. Yeah, this thing is usually just completely incompetent. Also, for some reason, it just loves to spam moves like Mist and Fury Attack on its first few turns. Eventually in this fight it does use a Blizzard, but it doesn't do very much and I finish it off on the next turn. So now there's nothing left for me to do other than just go and fight Jasmine right away. The pacing here in Johto is not particularly good, I will admit. She leads with Magnemite, and yeah, Venomoth has nothing good against it. Hidden Power Ice is resisted, but it still has the highest effective power. It does just over half. Magnemite paralyzes Venomoth, and I was like, oh no, why do I have the Mint Berry? I should really have a Paralyzed Cure Berry in this fight. I knock her lead out on the next turn, and then she sends in Steelix. At least Hidden Power is going to be useful here, but Paralysis prevents my attack not once, but twice. Finally on the third turn, I hit, and it does half, which is great, but still Steelix has the momentum, and its next Iron Tail finishes me off. Alright, I already mentioned it. The simple fix here is just have the Paralyzed Cure Berry. Steelix is next, and I'm going to knock this thing out over 2 turns. And I just want to explain something here, which is the fact that it uses Iron Tail instead of Rock Throw. As I mentioned before, the opponent's AI is calculating damage ranges, and because of type effectiveness and the same type attack bonus, Iron Tail is actually doing more damage to Venomoth than a move like Rock Throw would be, even though it's super effective. Many of you call this the super effective trap, and yes, I do fall victim to it all the time. Now, winning this fight has 2 advantages. Number 1, Venomoth levels up to 42 and it can finally learn Sleep Powder in the place of Gust. This move is going to be fantastic. Also, Jasmine's Badge gives me a 12.5% boost to my defense stat. Alright, it is time for more Rocket plotline, and I'm just going to take this time to say some thanks to people who have really made this content possible. I'll start by thanking everyone who supports me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you started supporting me when you realized that I was actually releasing a video every day, you might have noticed that you haven't appeared in all of the credits after you signed up, and that's because I produce all these videos asynchronously, so I do not go back and edit the credits like the day before the video releases. I finish the video, render it out, and upload it to YouTube. Going back and changing something and re-rendering would have caused so much slowdown that I wouldn't have been able to release at this pace, so that's why you might not have been included. Just know, if you're still a patron at the beginning of January, you will be included in that credit sequence. So just thank you so much for directly supporting me, it means the world. And now to the people who have directly supported with the creation of these videos. First of all, I want to say thank you to Richard, who has done some exceptional cuts. He basically takes the raw footage and slices it up so that we have awesome cuts like where I go through one door and come out a different door, or like where one battle fades into another battle, or like when I use my rare candies and the number just increments and it's not all like the sloppy text and flashes going like from the bag to the party screen and all that stuff. Also, this just really helps me when I'm recording voiceover, because then the playthrough is already cut up and I can see all the important moments as I scrub through the footage. So thank you so much, Richard. Next, I want to mention Leary and Skyla. They have been helping me write scripts, and it has been like so helpful. Scripting is my least favorite part of the process, and I don't think that I would have been able to speed my process up enough without them doing some editing and correcting all of the mistakes that my voice-to-text software makes. So thank you so much. Next is Oatspear, and he's done some programming for me, specifically building my auto splitter. As a viewer, you won't notice the impact that his work has had on these videos because you're just watching and going like, yeah, the splits are on screen. But every time you notice a mistake in those splits, that's probably because Sean and I used to manually write down each split by hand. So having an auto splitter that just automatically collects all this data and puts it in a big CSV file is so helpful. I cannot even state how many hours this saves us, how many mistakes it prevents. So this has also contributed to the fact that I can make videos this fast. Now to say thanks to Peep, because he's helped automating the credits sequence and managing your requests so that you're always assigned the Pokemon that you want. If you're not assigned the Pokemon you want, you should join my Patreon Discord and ask him to give you the Pokemon that you want. Vanman has been doing review on my Versus videos, which has been really helpful over this month because there have been some long ones. Of course, I want to say a major thanks to Serena for all the amazing art that she's put together for the channel. It really gives all of these characters so much life. And finally, after all of these people, I think that there's someone extremely special that we all have to give a huge thanks to in the comments, and that's Sean. He has done the majority of the video editing on every video that has been released on this channel this year. The only video that I personally produced, start to finish, was Houndoom. I quite frankly could just not do this number of playthroughs and produce content at this quality without him. And he's also really stepped up and worked some extra hours over the last couple months as the production has just really ramped up. So everyone, please say thanks to Sean in the comments. Okay, so now because the Academy Award music is playing or whatever, they're like, get off stage, stop talking. Let's get back to the playthrough, and we can do that by facing Claire. She leads with Dragonair. I just realized that like Claire and Dragonair kind of rhyme. Was that intentional? Like, is that the pun they're going for with her name? Seems kind of weird. Or is it like lair, like a dragon's lair? Like, I don't know. Anyways, Her name always confused me. Like, yeah, Claire is a cool name, so I guess that might be what they mean. In this case, though, her dragons can't really put up much of a fight against me because I have Hidden Power Ice. I make it to the Kingdra. I do almost half. It goes for Smoke Screen. It tries to use another one. Claire uses a Hyper Potion. But even when the Kingdra deals damage to Venomoth with Hyper Beam, it just doesn't do very much, and I knock it out on the next turn. Okay, so that's perfect. With her out of the way, I have to face the rival before the league, and there are two potential problems in this fight. The first one is his Typhlosion, which I actually don't even do half damage to with Psybeam. Unfortunately for my Venomoth, it is level 51, and at level 52, it is going to learn Psychic, which definitely would have 2-hit. I move on to the Magneton that's next, and yeah, of course it's the next problem, because it is going to paralyze me. Well, if it doesn't miss, that is. But I did less than half, so it hangs on with a sliver, and then it paralyzes me on the next turn. So that's unfortunate, because up next is Haunter. Obviously now it moves first, uses Curse, and that's bad for Venomoth because I'm paralyzed. If I fail to hit the Kadabra, this fight is going to be a loss. It goes for Future Sight, I use Swift, Paralysis doesn't prevent me from moving, and I knock it out. Okay, so I've made it to the league, and Venomoth just barely didn't level up, so I'm going to knock out a Wild Golbat, level up to 52, and teach Psychic in the place of Psybeam before I take on Will. Now in this fight we can see the strength of Hidden Power Ice, because it is going to be strong against his Xatu, his second Xatu, also later on his Executor. Against the Jinx, I do decide to put it to sleep and knock it out with Swift. Now you might wonder, why not just use Return at this point? Well, I was actually hanging on to Swift just in case I needed it if my accuracy got lowered against Karen. And earlier than that, Crobat on Koga's team does like to use Double Team. Will sends in Executor next, I go for Hidden Power Ice, it one-shots, and that leads to the Slowbro, which is always the Pokemon that takes the longest to knock out. But in this case, I just have Sleep Powder, and once it's snoozing, I knock it out with Swift, and that's that for the first member of the league. Koga's next, and theoretically this fight should be much easier because I have Psychic. I one-shot the Ariados, he sends in Venomoth next. Of course, this Psychic Flying type is very effective against my Bug Poison type, but luckily I have a Psychic type move, so I knock it out in one hit. Crobat's next, I go for Psychic, and it takes it down in one hit, and then Koga sends in Fortress. Now I want to mention something about the AI in this case. If the Fortress has low health, it will use Explosion. So what you really don't want here is to be moving slower than this thing, which is hard because it has 50 base speed. The only way that it would explode is if you can't do enough damage to it in a single turn, and then it's able to move second with Explosion, but in this case that doesn't play out, and I knock it out. All that's left is his Muck. I go for Psychic, it takes it to red, Muck uses Minimize, but my next Psychic still hits, and I take it down. And with that, I have made it to Bruno. And he should be the easiest member of the league because Psychic is super effective against 4 of his Pokemon, and Hidden Power is like good against the Onix. It is super effective, but only does 2 times damage. I take the Hitmontop out and the Hitmonchan out with one use of Psychic. That's really convenient. Also, the Hitmonchan didn't use Mach Punch because of my typing. Next, he sends in Onix. I go for Hidden Power Ice in this case and knock it out in one turn. So far, so good. Now it's time for the Machamp, and it does know Rock Slide, which is going to prioritize, so I'm really hoping for a one-hit. I don't get it. It strikes back with the super effective Rock move, but Venomoth tanks it like a champ. After that, Bruno uses a Max Potion, and I knock his ace out with 2 turns of Psychic. All that's left is Hitmonlee, and because of its moveset, it really doesn't have anything that's good against Venomoth, and I take it out with ease. So I've made it to Karen, and she is usually one of the most challenging members of the league. She's just so awful with status conditions and things like that. But in this case, I have brought Swift with me into the fight. In the case that the Umbreon uses Sand Attack, which it does on the first turn, of course, I start using Swift as a result. Umbreon confuses me, but I have a Bitter Berry, so I'm able to heal. And then Venomoth gets a critical hit, knocking it out. So that's perfect. Next, she sends in Houndoom. And against it, I'm probably going to need to put it to sleep because Psychic can't do anything to it. Unfortunately, Sleep Powder misses, the dog strikes back with Flamethrower, does so much. My next Sleep Powder misses, and then it knocks me out. Alright, so that was not particularly good luck. Let's try this all again. Once again, Umbreon gets a Sand Attack on the first turn. As a result, I start using Swift. It uses another Sand Attack, and yeah, this is really bad. So I think I'm going to need a different approach here if I want to win. In this fight, I do manage to put the Houndoom to sleep, which is lucky after my accuracy has been lowered so much, but I have to knock it out with Swift, which puts it in potion range, and Karen heals, allowing Houndoom to wake up and hit a critical hit with Flamethrower, which knocks Venomoth out. Okay, so the answer here to actually aid my consistency is to use Sleep Powder, which by definition is inconsistent, but I do think it's more consistent than just tanking like 3 sand attacks from the Umbreon. In this case, I still get hit by 1 before I knock it out, but that is better. Unfortunately, though, it's not good enough because Sleep Powder misses not once, but twice on the Houndoom, and it knocks me out again. So what I really need is to put the Umbreon to sleep right away, and that happens in the next battle, so this is perfect. Unfortunately though, this dark type is so tanky, so it's going to take me 5 hits with Swift to knock it out. And because I'm having to rely on Sleep Powder here, I'm starting to think that just using Return with maybe the Pink Bow might actually be a more effective strategy here. Well, we'll find that out in the optimized playthrough. For now, I just take it out with Swift and move on to the Houndoom. I'm going to have to use Sleep Powder here to avoid Flamethrower. Unfortunately, it misses, but that's okay. I can miss once. My next one puts it to sleep. Perfect. The only way I could lose here is if it wakes up. In this case, it doesn't, and I knock it out even after Karen heals with a max potion and a full heal. And from here, things get so much easier for Venomoth because it has super effective damage against her Pokemon. I go for Psychic against the Vileplume, and are you kidding me? It survives with a Sliver and uses Stun Spore, which paralyzes Venomoth. That is really not good. I knock it out on the next turn, but with my speed cut, my hopes are not high. Gengar comes in next. It could knock me out with Destiny Bond, but instead it just goes for Lick, which is a strange choice. Psychic one-shots, and all that's left is the Murkrow. Now, strangely enough, this flying type does not know any flying type moves, so it just goes for Feint Attack, which does very little, and then Hidden Power Ice knocks it out. So despite the paralysis, Venomoth has made it to the champion. Let's do this. Lance leads with Gyarados. I thought about using Sleep Powder against it, but it so often likes to set up Rain Dance on the first turn that I just figured using Psychic twice to knock it out would be the best play. Unfortunately here, my Psychic is not doing enough damage to pull that off, so Gyarados does do some damage with Flail. Still, I am liking my chances against the rest of his team because I have the Never Melt Ice and an Ice-type move. He sends in Aerodactyl next. It does no Wing Attack and an illegal Rock Slide. Aerodactyl cannot learn this move in Generation 2. But my Moth is faster and Hidden Power Ice one-shots, so that's perfect. Next he sends in Charizard. I go for Sleep Powder because I know I'm going to knock it out over at least 2 turns. Psychic does less than half. Charizard does stay asleep over the next 2 turns though, so I am able to knock it out. Now, it's time for the 3 Dragonites. First, he sends in the one that's level 50 because it knows Fire Blast, which is obviously super effective against my Bug Pokemon. But Hidden Power Ice does it, so Venomoth is going to do this on its first attempt. I knock out his final 2 Dragonites, and with that, the Johto portion of the game is complete. Venomoth finished the league with a time of 1 hour, 41 minutes, and 9 seconds with 16 resets at level 56. This took 6 hours and 4 minutes of game time. And now I'm off to Kanto. Most of the trainers here are going to be incredibly easy for Venomoth to beat. The only one that I can see being slightly challenging is perhaps Sabrina, so let's see how that fight goes. She leads with Espeon, and yeah, still I'm using Swift here. After all, the Espeon does no Sand Attack. Luckily in this case it fails, and I just barely don't knock it out on the next turn. Are you kidding me? It goes for Psychic. This does half damage and lowers Venomoth's special defense. Because of the Generation 2 special defense badge boost glitch, my special defense isn't boosted right now. And yeah, Mr. Mime goes for Psychic after I fail to knock it out, and Venomoth faints. Here's the thing about Venomoth though. It's fast, and because I have access to Sleep Powder, I don't really need to overlevel for any major fights, because I can just put the opponent to sleep and then knock them out. This is how I end up getting by Sabrina on my next attempt. However, I should really teach Venomoth Return now. Let's not put this off any longer. With that, I sweep through the rest of Kanto and arrive at Blue without any more resets. Now, he is one of the more challenging trainers in the game just because of the type diversity on his team. So, will I be able to do this? Let's see. So So if we take a quick look at his team, Venomoth unfortunately doesn't have a particularly good matchup here. He leads with Pidgeot, which has wing attack, which is super effective, and it is better than base 35 power in this generation. It has base 60 power. Then he has Alakazam, which is super effective, followed by Rhydon, which is super effective. And then at the end of his team, he has Arcanine with Flamethrower. So really, Venomoth only has a good matchup against like kind of the Gyarados and the Exeggutor. But even out of those cases, I only have good moves against the Exeggutor because I can use Hidden Power Ice. I knock out his lead Pidgeot, he sends in Rhydon next, and I'm really hoping here that Hidden Power Ice and special damage are enough to knock it out. And it is. Next, he chooses Arcanine because it has Flamethrower, and I'm going to need to put this thing to sleep. The unfortunate thing here is the fact that he has full restores, so he wakes it up immediately on the next turn. I put it back to sleep, go for Psychic again. I'm really hoping for a special defense drop here so I can knock it out in 2 turns. Unfortunately though, having to rely on Sleep Powder so much means that I'm eventually going to miss, which happens on the next turn, and Arcanine gets through a Flamethrower, which takes Venomoth down to 66 hit points. So this is really not that good. I knock it out on the next turn, and then he sends in Alakazam. Now I am faster, so I was really hoping that I could just one-shot with Return, but it survives on the tiniest amount of health and knocks Venomoth out. Alright, so that's pretty unfortunate. I think I can do this though if I have just a bit of better luck. Maybe if I avoid Flamethrower on, let's say, the Arcanine. Also, I really hope that the Rhydon isn't just a favorable roll. In this case, I managed to knock it out again. I move on to the Arcanine, which I'm able to put to sleep once, twice, and 3 times before I take it out. Next, I move on to the Alakazam, and here I decided to bypass sleep again and go for a Return, hoping for a better damage roll. But once again, Alakazam survives. In this case, though, it just goes for Reflect. So I knock it out without taking any damage, which is perfect. Gyarados is next. No way I'm going to 2-hit this thing, so I put it to sleep and use Psychic, and over 3 turns, I knock it out. All that's left is the Exeggutor. Obviously, Hidden Power Ice is super effective, and it does even more damage in this case because I get a critical hit. And with that, I have made it to the ultimate Generation 2 test. It's time to face Red. First is Pikachu. Now, something that you will have come to know if you've watched a lot of my Generation 2 videos is the fact that it loves to spam Charm on the first turn, and I really wasn't sure that I was going to knock it out in 1 hit. I need my attack stat to make sure that I can knock the Snorlax out in 3 hits to prevent it from using Rest, so I have to bank on Sleep Powder here. Luckily, I do put it to sleep, and then when I go for Return, I one-shot Pikachu, so that's nice. Next, Red makes a choice that I was a little bit confused about. He chooses Snorlax instead of Espeon. I really thought he was going to go for Espeon next because it has super effective damage in the form of Psychic. Well, at least in this case, I can put the Snorlax to sleep and avoid it using Amnesia, which I guess is okay. Still, it has significantly lower physical defense than it has special defense, so I go for Return, and it's really not even doing a third. I have used all of my rare candies at this point, and I also trained in Mount Silver to boost Venomoth from level 64, which it was after the blue fight, to level 65. So I was hoping this would be enough, but luckily Sleep Powder is enough because Snorlax just, keeps snoring, and then I knock it out. Next is Venusaur, and this thing really isn't that good because the AI doesn't know that Solar Beam is a 2-turn move. It just sees like, ha, massive damage with this move, I'll use it. And it doesn't work that way, Venusaur, so this thing faints. Next is Charizard, and I know that I am going to have to put it to sleep to have success. However, I was hoping that Psychic would do more damage, and I was also hoping that it was going to sleep longer. It wakes up, hits Flamethrower, and Venomoth goes down. Okay, let's try this again. Hopefully it isn't just a damage roll against the Pikachu. I go for Return, and okay. So it doesn't knock it out, fine, whatever. It hits Thunder, doing about a third. Red uses a full restore on Pikachu, and then I knock it out with my next hit. Okay, so I got the favorable roll that time. He sends in Snorlax next, and in this case, it manages to just sneak 1 Amnesia in before I put it to sleep with my second Sleep Powder. But the problem with using sleep tactics in Generation 2 is that on the turn the Pokemon wakes up, they're allowed to strike back. This is how it works in modern Pokemon as well. And so when Snorlax wakes up, hits Body Slam, and gets a critical hit, it knocks Venomoth out. So in moments like this, I really have to make the decision. Do I just keep trying the fight, adjust my move pool, or do I go and train? And in this case, I think that adjusting my move pool just a tiny bit might help. After all, Hidden Power Ice doesn't give me any edges against Red's team, so I can swap it out for Rest, and then at least Venomoth has some method of recovering. I make it past the Snorlax with half health, and here's where Rest is useful. Because Venusaur is going to either use Sunny Day or Solar Beam, both which don't do damage on one turn, if I put it to sleep, I can then use Rest and heal fairly reliably. In this case, Venusaur wakes up early and uses Sunny Day, which is like worst case scenario, because now the Charizard is going to be even more scary. But luckily I resist Solar Beam, so it does very little damage, and then I'm able to polish the Venusaur off. Okay, so it's time for the Charizard, let's do this. I put it to sleep right away, that's perfect. Psychic doesn't do very much. It wakes up, hits Flamethrower, and Venomoth survives. Okay, that's perfect. I put it back to sleep and knock it out with 2 more Psychics. Now it's time to see who Red's going to choose next, and obviously the choice is Espeon. I am still so surprised that this thing didn't come out earlier. I guess maybe he's seeing the fact that I'm a bug type, so maybe he thinks he should keep Espeon back just to keep it safe. Yeah, that's probably how the AI is working. I go for Sleep Powder, it puts it to sleep, that's perfect. And then I finish it with 2 returns. So I've arrived at Red's final Pokemon. It's time for the Blastoise. I put it to sleep, rest up, healing to full. Blastoise wakes up, sets up Rain Dance, and then it does so much with Surf. But luckily I wake up, put the turtle back to sleep, and now I can start using Psychic. Looks like it's doing just less than a third, so this is going to be a 4-hit. Luckily, Blastoise sleeps long enough, and I take it down. So Venomoth clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 25 seconds, with 20 resets at level 76. And this took 7 hours and 28 minutes of game time. So of my recent Generation 2 videos, this is by far the worst time. Granted, I never really expected Venomoth to compete with Pokemon like Lapras, Snorlax, Espeon, and Umbreon. Still, I do want to see how good the mascot of the channel can do in a playthrough of Generation 2, so let's jump in and do some optimizations. So going up against Falkner, you'll notice that my Venonat is now 1 level higher than it was in my previous playthrough. This isn't impactful for this fight, but I do want to squeeze out as many levels as possible before I get to Bugsy specifically. Remember, Fury Cutter was very scary. Also, just before I head into Union Cave, I do some additional training in the wild, just so that Venonat learns Confusion before this next section of the game. After all, if I run into, like, say, the Hiker, who has Rock-type Pokemon, I do not want to have to defeat him with Tackle and Supersonic, so having Confusion is going to be a huge benefit. In Bugsy's gym, I fight all of the trainers, and this gets Venonat to level 20. I actually continue training after this just because I want all of the experience possible. Remember, I am going to need to evolve into a Venomoth before I defeat Whitney. Bugsy himself is going to require a little bit of luck. I need to mess the Scyther up in some way when it's using Fury Cutter. Luckily in this case, it just misses first turn against me and my Supersonic lands, so yeah, that's exactly what I need. But then it hits itself not once, but twice, so that's a lucky win. But the thing about luck is that in a playthrough, it always balances out, because in the fight against the rival, I lose to the Quilava because it has Ember, so that's annoying. Still, with Venonat's damage ranges with Swift, that shouldn't be happening because I can 3-hit this thing, so in the next fight, I finish it off, and now I'm moving on to Whitney. And for this fight, I trained to level 31 before even attempting it. I don't think it makes sense to waste time attempting at lower levels, and by doing this, I'm actually going to be able to shave a lot of time off this playthrough. Still, Venomoth isn't going to get a great time just because it had to do this. And in this case, things turn out very poorly for me because yes, the Clefairy uses Metronome, which rolls Leech Life, and this is like the worst possible move because look at how much it is healing the Miltank every turn. And in this case, I need to use Disable so that Rollout doesn't keep building damage, and yeah, Miltank takes Venomoth down. But in the next fight, when Leech Seed isn't healing the Miltank, I have a guaranteed 3-hit with Confusion, so now I don't need to Disable and I can just knock it out right away. That is how the fight was supposed to go the first time around. Of course, I'm once again going to be going for Hidden Power Ice. If you're not watching, if you're just listening in the background, please look over at the screen right now and check out what this Magnemite does to me in Burn Tower. I cannot believe how many times I hit myself in Confusion here. Like, this is some of the worst luck. And as a result, Venomoth gets its 3rd reset. So interestingly enough, most of the resets I have had here have been because of bad luck. And I want to mention that here because while it does appear on a surface level to be luck, it isn't really luck. Like, yes, the Whitney fight was exclusively luck, but outside of that, Venomoth's overall playthrough is just going to have more resets than most Pokemon will have, and that's because it has to rely on moves like, let's say, Sleep Powder, Disable, Supersonic. Now, I do find it strange that in the fights that I have had resets, I was supposed to just make it through the fight without any resets. So overall, I have got very unlucky in the early stages of the game, but in the later stages of the game, there will be occasional resets just because of the tactics that I have to rely on using. Now, of course, there's an argument to be made for like, shouldn't you just level up more and then make all the fights consistent? Well, yes, I could do that, but in Johto, I really don't think that that's a good choice because you level so slowly when fighting trainers. Like, you can defeat every trainer in the region and be like level 60. The level curve in these games is just so wonky. So I've been mentioning inconsistencies, and of course the last trainers that we saw on screen were not inconsistent, and that leads me to Jasmine, who is the 7th gym leader. But for this fight, I have an answer, which is obviously the Paralyzed Cure Berry. It heals paralysis against the first Magnemite, then she sends in Steelix. I accidentally used Psybeam here, really should have used Hidden Power Ice, because that would have prevented Jasmine from using a Hyper Potion. Still, even with that, I knocked the Steelix out without taking any damage. Now she does have one more Magnemite, but even with Confusion and Thunder Wave, barring some extremely bad luck, I should win. And in this case, I do. I don't really know what to say about Claire. Just being able to set your hidden power type makes this fight quite easy. I sweep through her team and arrive at the league. I'll just skip directly to Karen because Venomoth has no problems against the first 3 league members. In this fight I can use the Pink Bow and Return to do more damage to the Umbreon and the Houndoom. The problem is though that I need favorable damage rolls to 2-hit the Umbreon, so I'm still going to have to rely on Sleep Powder here to avoid getting hit by Sand Attack. Unfortunately I do get my accuracy lowered once, which means the Houndoom is going to be a bit scarier. Luckily, I put it to sleep, and here's where Return is very helpful, because with it, I have a guaranteed 2-hit, and in this case, I score a crit, which in this case is a 2-turn knockout as well, because I missed my first Return. After that, the rest of Karen's team is a bit easier, but still the Vileplume doesn't go down in 1 hit, so I get paralyzed. But the thing is, the Gengar is usually using Curse or Lick, so I'm not too worried about it because I can 1-hit with Psychic. And all that's left is the Murkrow, and as we saw before, it is not very good. As was the case before, Lance is not actually a challenge. This time I do go for Sleep Powder against the Gyarados. I think that's the better strategy, just so it doesn't deal any chip damage to you with a move like Flail. After that are Lance's 2 hardest Pokemon, the Aerodactyl, which is a hard rock type, then the Charizard, which is a much squishier fire type, and in this case it does land 1 Flamethrower, but that's not nearly enough because once it goes down, I just sweep through the final Dragonites. And with that out of the way, let's skip all the way back to Blue. Now you're probably noticing that this section of the video is a lot less in-depth than it normally is. And that's because, Venomoth just has answers for all of these Pokemon, and its move pool is so small that the choices are just obvious. I have to deal damage with Psychic Return or Hidden Power Ice, and I have to use Sleep Powder when the opponent is going to do massive damage to me and I can't 1-hit. Now in this case against Arcanine, I really did not want to have to use Sleep Powder twice. It wakes up and then I was hoping that Psychic would cause a special defense drop or roll favorable damage and 2-hit, but neither of those things play out today, and as a result I take a loss here as well. But overall 4 resets before Red is really not that bad. I do manage to defeat Blue on my next fight against him, and now it's time for the final trainer of the run. Once again, I have the same moveset that I had last time. However, I have brought the leftovers into this fight this time because I am one-shotting the Pikachu with Return in this case. The nice thing about this item is that the chip damage that Snorlax can deal with Snore is much less, and then because I'm going to 2-hit the following Venusaur, I gain back all of my health and move on to the Charizard with full health. That means if it hits with a Flamethrower, I am probably going to survive. In this case though, it just keeps sleeping, I knock it out. Espeon's next, I take it down with 2 uses of Return. I got a critical hit there, but I don't really think it mattered. I would have 2-hit anyways. Last is Blastoise, I put it to sleep and knock it out. So that's it. Venomoth clocks in with a time of 1 hour, 47 minutes, and 44 seconds, with 4 resets at level 76. This took 6 hours and 52 minutes of game time. And now let's add its results to my Generation 2 data. This is basically becoming like a leaderboard in combination with a tier list and also all of my data all at once. I'm hoping that this is an interesting way to see it all and not too overwhelming. Anyways, today Venomoth gets a place in the B tier. It is slightly faster than Skarmory, but significantly slower than Murkrow. Overall, I think the thing that held it back the most was having to evolve throughout the playthrough. Pokemon like Murkrow, Mantine, and Aerodactyl are all ranked above it just because they start fully evolved, and so the initial portion of the game is a little bit easier for them than, in this case, Venomoth when it had to evolve. And so now I should really share my thoughts on how to rank Pokemon that have evolved in their playthroughs versus Pokemon that haven't. Well, in the case of Venomoth evolving from a Venonat being ranked up against a Pokemon like Murkrow, I actually do think it's fair because this is how the Pokemon would naturally function in the game. If you traded yourself an egg, hatched it, and started with a Venonat, and then traded yourself an egg, hatched it, and started with a Murkrow, the playthroughs would play out basically like this, unless you gave yourself Drill Peck on Murkrow, which then it would be a completely different story. Drill Peck Murkrow will have its time on the channel. I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be fun to do some egg move runs. Things are slightly less clear when we rank a Pokemon like Mantine against Espeon, because yes, Espeon should have started as an Eevee and evolved throughout the playthrough, but they are both final stage Pokemon, so it is sort of fair to put them up against each other. I do think that this is the fairest way to rank these two against each other. But things are really unfair when we rank a Pokemon like Venonat evolving into Venomoth against a Pokemon like Espeon, which started as an Espeon. Obviously, there is a clear advantage here for Espeon, and Venomoth is at a clear disadvantage. So what I'm going to have to do is divide up some of this data. We will see Pokemon that started fully evolved and have a prior evolution in combination with Pokemon that are single stages or legendaries. And then in a separate list, we will see single stage Pokemon with Pokemon that evolved throughout their playthrough. However, we'll have to wait to 2023 to see those graphics. And now I should announce my plans for the next year. Well, I am now actively playing 4 games on the channel, so every week we are going to rotate to a different game. We'll start with Yellow, then go to Crystal, then Emerald, and finally Fire Red. That means that once a month we should get at least one video of every single game. January is going to kick off with Doduo in Pokemon Yellow, and then in the second week we are going to have our first stage video in Pokemon Crystal, which is going to be Coughing. I think both these videos are going to be really fun, and I am so excited for the next year of the channel, so stay tuned. I hope you've all had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year, everyone. Once again, a huge thanks to everyone who's supported me. I really could not do it without all of you. I'll see you next year.